It was supposed to be just another press conference. The cameras rolled. Reporters fidgeted. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell adjusted his tie and took a breath. Then came the question that shattered the room. A young journalist asked softly, "What do you say to struggling families who feel inflation is crushing them?" Powell didn't blink. He leaned forward and said, "Most Americans don't understand how the economy really works. That's part of the problem." Silence, then a few stunned gasps. Reporters scribbled. Outside, TV anchors paused mid-sentence. Within minutes, the clip spread like wildfire. A mother in Ohio dropped her grocery bags and stared at the screen. A truck driver in Michigan pulled over, shaking his head. A teacher in Pennsylvania stood frozen, tears in her eyes. For millions, it felt personal, like they were being blamed for surviving. On Twitter, the anger exploded. "I lost my job, and now I'm the problem." Powell just spat on every struggling family. It wasn't just words, it was a dagger. And America? America bled. That night, Donald Trump stood behind a podium in Georgia. He wasn't scheduled to speak yet, but something in his eyes said otherwise. He had seen the clip, he had heard the words, and he was furious. The crowd was restless, whispering about Powell. But when Trump stepped forward, silence swept over them. He didn't read from notes. He looked straight ahead. "Jerome Powell didn't just insult your intelligence," he said, voice steady. "He exposed his own arrogance." The crowd gasped. Trump raised a finger. "The only thing Americans don't understand is how he still has a job." The audience exploded. Cheers, applause. But Trump wasn't smiling. He listed names. Lisa, the single mum from Florida who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't buy milk. John, the veteran who sold his truck to pay rent. Sarah, the small business owner drowning in interest rates. "He thinks you're the problem," Trump shouted. "No, he is." A woman near the stage cried into her flag. A boy on his father's shoulders shouted, "Tell him, Trump." And then came the line no one would forget. "If Jerome Powell thinks you're the problem, then I say, he's unfit to lead anything with a $sign." By morning, the headlines were blistering. Powell under fire after shocking comment. Trump turns press conference into national reckoning. CNN played the clip on repeat. Fox News aired the rally. Even independents couldn't ignore what was happening. But outside the newsrooms, something deeper stirred. Something real. At a diner in Iowa, people sat in silence, watching Trump's speech again. A man who hadn't voted in years whispered, "He spoke for me." A waitress wiped her eyes and said, "Finally, someone sees us." In a school hallway, teachers huddled over their phones. A janitor shook his head, whispering, "We are not the problem." Everywhere, pain turned into pride. Tears turned into strength. Not because the struggle disappeared, but because they weren't alone anymore. Trump had reminded them. They weren't broken. They weren't blind. They were Americans. And they mattered. People started writing letters, calling radio shows, telling their stories. No fancy words, just truth. The economy had numbers, but behind every number was a name, a face, a life. And now, for the first time in a long time, those lives had a voice again. Donald Trump lit that fire, and America remembered how to feel. Her name was Carla Henderson, 3rd-grade teacher, single mum, lived in Akron, Ohio. She watched Powell's press conference in the dark. Her son, Max, was asleep beside her on the couch. She'd skipped dinner so he could eat. When Powell said those words, something inside her cracked. She stood up, turned off the TV and walked to the kitchen. Her fridge was nearly empty. 2 eggs, half a gallon of milk. Unpaid bills taped to the door like quiet curses. She whispered to herself, "I went to college. I followed every rule. Why am I still drowning?" The next morning, she drove to school on a quarter tank. No heat, hands shivering on the wheel. Her students smiled when she entered. But inside, Carla couldn't breathe. Inflation had stolen more than her paycheck. It had taken her hope. That night, she watched Trump's rally on her phone. And when he said, "He thinks you're the problem?" Carla broke down, sobbing into her sweater. "Thank you," she whispered. Not because her life was fixed, but because someone finally saw her pain. That moment, it healed something small, something sacred, and she wasn't the only one. Marcus Fields drove a rusted red semi, 59 years old, 2 heart attacks behind him, no retirement, no backup plan. He'd been on the road for 37 years, but diesel prices, interest rates, they were killing him now. He was parked at a truck stop in Indiana when the Powell clip came on his radio. Most Americans don't understand how the economy works. That's part of the problem. Marcus stared at the windshield, mouth open, fists clenched. "I am the economy," he muttered. "I move it every damn day." His wallet had $14, not enough to fill the tank, barely enough to eat. He hadn't seen his wife in weeks, missed his granddaughter's birthday. Now he was being told he didn't understand. He punched the dashboard. Later that night, while eating cold chili from a can, Marcus watched Trump's rally on his cracked phone. When Trump roared, he exposed his own arrogance. Marcus stood up from his seat and saluted the screen. "Thank you, Mr. President," he whispered. Tears rolled down his face, not from weakness, but because someone, finally, had his back. He started driving again, not just for miles, but for meaning. In a small kitchen in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a boy named Caleb sat across from his dad. Dinner was half a sandwich, no lights on, just the glow of a phone charging by the window. Caleb was 7. He had big eyes and a quiet voice. "Dad," he asked, "are we poor because we don't understand money?" His father froze. He had seen Powell's words on TV. He had watched Trump's speech on YouTube. He had heard the crowd roar, and he had cried in silence. Now his son was asking if they were poor, because they were stupid. The father dropped his fork. His throat tightened. Then he walked around the table, knelt by Caleb's side, and pulled him into his arms. "No," he whispered. "No, son. We're poor because people in power forgot about people like us. But we are not the problem. We're the proof that this country still has heart." Later, he posted about it on Facebook. The story went viral. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, all saying the same thing. We feel this. We are this. That night across America, a quiet revolution began. Not with anger, but with truth. And Trump had lit the match. The next morning, cable news invited financial analysts, suits with slick smiles, laughter behind closed doors. "He's not wrong," one chuckled. "Most Americans don't understand quantitative tightening." They sipped coffee in clean studios, charts behind them, smugness in front. Meanwhile, in Detroit, a father pawned his wedding ring. In Phoenix, a grandma mixed water into milk to stretch it. Main Street wasn't talking about policy. Main Street was choosing between heat and rent. Trump saw it. He spoke again, this time on a morning show. "They laugh in the towers, you cry in the kitchens," he said, eyes burning. "They call you confused. I call you forgotten patriots. They watch numbers. You live reality." Social media exploded. Trump's not campaigning. He's defending us. A bakery owner in Pittsburgh taped the quote to her shop window. A retired coal miner in West Virginia wrote it on a cardboard sign outside his trailer. And for the first time in months, donations poured into local food banks. Not because things got easier, but because pain was finally being seen. Wall Street kept laughing. But America was waking up. 3 days later, a letter landed on the president's desk. Not from a donor, not from a lobbyist, but from a 9-year-old girl named Ruby. It came with a drawing, 2 stick figures. One had a speech bubble. "We're not dumb, we're hurting." The letter read, "Dear Mr. President, my mommy cries a lot at night. We don't have enough food. I heard the man on TV say we don't understand. But I understand my mommy works hard, and she is tired. Please tell the money man to stop saying bad things about people like us. Love, Ruby." It hit like a hammer. Someone leaked it to the press, and the nation stopped. Talk shows read it aloud. Newspapers printed it front page. Millions cried. But the reaction from the White House? Silence. No apology. No statement. Just silence. Until Trump held the letter up at his next rally. "This," he said softly, voice trembling, "this is who they ignore. And this is why I'll never stop fighting." The crowd stood in silence. Then applause thundered, not just for Trump, but for Dan Ruby. For her mum, for all of them. While the country wept and remembered itself, Jerome Powell stepped forward again. Not with an apology, but with more for numbers. In an emergency press briefing, he said, "We sympathize with Americans, but emotional reactions won't solve inflation. Financial literacy is key." It was cold. It was stiff. It was gasoline. Twitter exploded. "As we understand pain" trended for 48 hours. A nurse from Kansas wrote, "I held my father's hand as he died, not from lack of literacy, but from lack of care." A farmer in Iowa posted, "I don't need Wall Street terms, I need to keep my land." Trump, upon hearing Powell's follow-up, didn't shout this time. He sat with a small-town family in Wisconsin, cameras rolling, a bowl of beans on the table. "I don't think Americans need to learn Wall Street," he said quietly. "I think Wall Street needs to learn compassion." He looked into the camera. No more charts, no more blame, just help. It wasn't a rally, it was a reckoning, and people felt it, not in their minds and in their souls, because pain was speaking louder than power. And Trump was still listening. In a small Alabama town, Mayor Ellis Green watched Powell's latest statement on his office laptop. He'd served 22 years, never missed a town hall, never took a raise. But today, he sat with his head in his hands. His community had lost 2 factories. Their grocery store had shut down last winter. And now their children were eating lunch from vending machines. And yet, the Fed chair said they needed more financial literacy. Mayor Green stood up. He walked to the town square, where the local news crew had gathered. With trembling hands, he took the mic and looked into the camera. "I've read every budget, balanced every book, but I can't fix greed." He pointed to the old bank building behind him, now boarded up. "Jerome Powell says we're the problem. No, sir. The problem is Washington doesn't know what a grocery bill looks like anymore." The clip went viral. Trump called him that evening. "Thank you, Mayor," Trump said. "You told the truth. You stood for your people." Green didn't cry easily, but that call broke him, because for once it felt like someone in power still had a soul. Pressure built. Protests began forming outside the Federal Reserve. Not violent, just painful. Mothers held signs. "I can't budget what I don't have." Veterans stood silently with folded flags. Children passed out drawings that read, "We understand. We're just tired." News anchors asked, "Will Jerome Powell speak directly to the people?" He did, sort of. Under pressure, Powell agreed to a town hall event. 1 hour, scripted questions, limited audience. But someone snuck through, a retired school lunch worker named Annie Ray. She walked up, voice shaking. "Mr. Powell," she began, "I've served food to kids for 40 years. I watched them cry over spilled milk. I watched teachers pay for extra trays. So before you tell us we don't understand the economy..." She paused, pulled out a photo of her grandson. "Maybe you should understand us." Powell blinked. The room froze. He didn't respond. He couldn't. The moderator moved on. But the moment, it went viral in minutes. Trump tweeted just 4 words: "Annie Ray for president." The internet broke, and something shifted again. For the first time, Powell looked small. That weekend, Trump cancelled 3 interviews. No press, No speeches, no suits. He boarded a small plane and flew to East Palestine, Ohio, a town still recovering from economic scars and environmental pain. No crowds, no cameras, just pain. He met a family who'd lost their farm, sat on a porch with a father who had laid off his own son, listened to a girl named Emma who drew on napkins because paper was too expensive. Trump didn't talk much. He just listened. At one point, Emma asked him, "Are you mad at the money man?" He smiled softly. "No, sweetheart, I'm sad. Sad that people forgot you matter." Then he looked at her dad and said, "When this country stops listening to its children, we stop being a country." A neighbour recorded that moment. By morning, the video had 20 million views, not because Trump shouted, not because he blamed, but because he sat on a porch, held a little girl's drawing, and let the world feel again. People weren't just watching him, they were following him. Not because he promised gold, but because he remembered pain and honoured it. CNN announced a surprise town hall debate. Jerome Powell was invited. Donald Trump was confirmed. America waited, but when the lights came up, Powell's chair was empty. The moderator explained. Chairman Powell declined, citing scheduling conflicts. Trump sat quietly at the other end. Then he stood. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't gloat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Ruby's letter, now laminated. This was written by a 9-year-old. That chair may be empty tonight, but our hearts are not. He paused, looked directly into the camera. You don't need to know bond yields to know what pain feels like. You don't need a degree to know when your rent went up and your hope went down. The audience sat in stunned silence. Then he walked over to Powell's empty chair. He placed Ruby's letter on the cushion, then whispered, "This is who should be heard." A teacher in Tennessee sobbed. A factory worker in Illinois turned up the volume. A mother in Texas dropped to her knees in prayer. The debate wasn't loud, it was human. And that made it unforgettable. The pressure was unbearable. Media outlets begged Powell to explain. Congress members demanded answers. Americans waited, but the apology never came. Instead, the Fed released a short statement. "We regret any misinterpretations of the chairman's remarks." That was it. A cold, lifeless sentence. No names, no ownership, no emotion. For many, it felt like a slap in the face. Ruby's mum read it on her phone, sitting on her porch. Tears ran down her cheeks. "I guess they really don't see us," she whispered. Trump, hearing about the statement, held a press event, but not at a podium. He stood beside Carla the teacher, Marcus the truck driver, Mayor Green, Annie Ray. "I brought the people they can't see," he said, "because I refuse to let America be invisible." No script, just tears, stories, and truth. That day, something happened. A silent army rose, not with signs or chants, but with hope. Not just for politics, but for dignity. And Powell, he stayed silent. But the people? They were finally speaking, and they were loud with love. It was a quiet Sunday, a small town in Missouri. Church bells rang. At a local memorial for fallen workers, an old American flag slipped from its pole and fell into the dirt. The crowd gasped, but before anyone could move, a young boy, maybe 10, raced forward. He knelt gently, lifted the flag with both hands, pressed it to his chest. Then he looked up and said, "My dad said when the flag falls, you don't wait for someone else to pick it up." Someone filmed it. The video went viral. When Trump saw it, he called the boy's family. He didn't mention polls, or the Fed, or politics. Just one thing. "Your son reminded us what we stand for." That clip became a national symbol. Late-night shows played it. Veterans wept. Even Powell's harshest defenders went quiet. Because in a nation divided by numbers, a child had brought them back to something else sacred. And it wasn't policy, it wasn't profit, it was pride. Trump ended his next speech with the clip on the big screen. No words, just applause and tears. Because sometimes a fallen flag can raise a whole country. Late one evening in a cold New Jersey alley, an elderly man named Frank spotted a crumpled dollar bill on the sidewalk. He paused. Then he picked it up and just stared. He didn't smile. He didn't rush to spend it. He simply stood there, remembering. A time when that dollar meant a sandwich, a ride home, a chance. Now, it couldn't even buy him a loaf of bread. Frank walked into the shelter where he often slept and pinned the dollar to the wall under a note. This used to mean something. Someone took a photo. It made its way online. By morning, over 5 million people had shared it. Trump reposted it with 5 words. This is the broken truth. It hit harder than any speech, because that dollar, that moment, and said everything Powell couldn't. Not in charts, not in figures, but in silence. And once again, America didn't just see a currency problem. It saw a crisis of meaning. The kind that couldn't be solved by interest rates, but by remembrance. It came suddenly, a press release, short, cold. Effective immediately, Jerome Powell is stepping down as chair of the Federal Reserve. No apology, no press conference, no handshake goodbye, just gone. The nation froze, some cheered, others wept. But most just sat still, staring at the screen. For many, it wasn't about the man, it was about the message. The arrogance was gone, but the wounds remained. Later that night, Trump addressed the nation. No rally, just him at a wooden desk, a small flag behind him. He didn't celebrate. He spoke like a father. I didn't ask for Powell to fall. I asked for Americans to rise. He looked directly into the camera. You were never the problem. You were the ones holding us together. People cried again. Because it wasn't victory they felt. It was validation. And that was worth more than any market rebound. Months passed, the media moved on, but the people did not. They remembered Ruby's letter, Carla's tears, Marcus's truck, Annie Ray's voice, that boy lifting the flag, and the dollar on the wall. Across the country, something quiet but holy happened. Neighbours checked on neighbours. Churches reopened their food pantries. Kids organised lemonade stands, not for toys, but to help struggling families. And Trump? He didn't take credit. He took notes, he kept showing up. Not for the cameras, but for the people. One day, Ruby and her mum were invited to a small event. They sat front row. Trump walked over, knelt to Ruby's eye level and said, "You reminded us what matters." Then he gave her something wrapped in velvet. Inside was a framed dollar bill, the one from Frank's wall. Underneath, engraved, "This used to mean something. Now, it means you." And that moment, that pure human moment, healed a nation. If this story touched your heart, if you saw yourself in these people, if you cried, remembered, or just finally felt seen, please, don't just scroll. Leave a comment. Tell us your story. Like this video so others can feel it too. Subscribe, not for numbers but for hope. We're building something real here, together. This wasn't just a video, this was my hug for America. Thank you for watching, thank you for feeling, we see you, and we will never stop telling your story.